Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Andrew Saluk, and I'm your host for today's webinar, Winning Strategies Using Automotive Marketing Platform. We have an outstanding panel for you today. We are delighted to feature Sandra Delolio, Internet Director at Atlantic Auto Group. With me are also two highly skilled strategists and tacticians with Automotive Marketing Platform. We have Nicole Anderson representing our marketing account managers and Jesse Gray on behalf of our performance managers. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
And as we take a look at the agenda today, you can see it's pretty busy. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees are muted, but if you have questions throughout the session, please put them in the go-to console on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll take 10 to 15 minutes at the very end of the broadcast for these questions, and we'll also send everybody a recording after the webinar is concluded. But I think before we get deep into the topics, how about our panelists share their key areas of focus for today's broadcast? So Nicole, what are you hoping that the audience takes away?
Yeah, hello. I am hoping to expand the understanding of how versatile and impactful AMP can really be, and hopefully inspire some actionable campaign ideas that you can take away for your marketing planning.
Thank you. And Sandra, what would you say is your key message for the audience today?
My key message is that AMP is not used just as a tool, but actually as a conjunction with your advertising, marketing, and how to influence both the sales and service parts of your dealership to use AMP to fully engage with your customers on a basis that they're not used to, so that they can know what the dealership is about, not just selling cars or servicing cars, but community outreach as well.
Okay, I look forward to getting into that a little bit deeper today. And then Jesse, maybe you could set the stage by sharing your perspective on AMP.
Sure. I want to paint a picture for the audience today. Imagine you have a customer that bought from your store 3 years ago. The salesperson who sold the vehicle, gone. In the time since, they haven't received a single message from a human being at your dealership. Now imagine this same customer goes online today and values the vehicle they bought from you right now. With AMP, we see it. And because of that, we can drop the right message at the right time and bring them back to you. That's really the power of AMP. While your competitors are waiting around for customers to raise their hand, AMP is really helping that customer raise their hand in the first place. So what I don't want to pretend is that AMP is some sort of magical lead generation machine. That's not what it's built for. AMP is an influence platform. It's a tool to activate customers who already exist inside your ecosystem, people you're not seeing in the CRM because they're not submitting leads, but they're still shopping. They're still deciding. This session is about showing you the value you might be missing, how it works, how to make it work harder, and how to plug the gaps so AMP doesn't just deliver value, it proves it. Loyalty matters now more than ever, and in a competitive marketplace, AMP protects lifetime value by spotting intent no one else can.
That's a really insightful point. And as you say that, Jesse, it makes me think, man, this is all about data. And so maybe let's talk about that. Let's talk about how AMP activates that data as part of Cox Automotive's deep native CDP. And Nicole, maybe you could have some comments there.
Absolutely. So as we have said, how many times can we use the word activate in the presentation? We're going to find out, but AMP is the tool that really does activate. Not only is it going to activate on the data that exists in your CRM and your customers' sold and service history with you, it's also going to combine all of that information with what your customers are doing online via our predictive insights and Cox Automotive online shopping behavior data. What it can do is identify what your customers are shopping for, where they are in their life cycle of a customer journey. And because AMP has all of these customer journeys that it's able to drive, it's important to keep a note that at every point in an AMP campaign, there's lots of opportunity for the customer to engage again. And what really makes AMP a really cool tool, and because we're fully integrated in the CRM, AMP can trigger engagement-based tasks, generate direct or indirect leads, or even send those engaged customers to an accessible list. I say that because it's really important to think about all these different puzzle pieces that AMP can use to present those high value opportunities to your sales team, to your BD agent team, And what can really make the biggest difference in your AMP experience is working closely with your marketing account manager to make sure that all of those ways that AMP can present those opportunities are being presented in the best way that works for your specific store, for your specific needs, and for your teams and your folks who are actually going to be having those conversations with those opportunities that AMP identifies.
Thanks, Nicole. And Jesse, how do you think about these data points coming together to enable effective marketing?
For me, I think what really sets AMP apart is the audience. This isn't a CRM blast. These are people showing buying behaviors right now across Cox Automotive's ecosystem. We're talking about real-time signals from places like AutoTrader, Dealer.com, Kelley Blue Book, CRM behavior. AMP surfaces people who are actively shopping and ready to buy. And we're not talking about people who are theoretically in the market, but people who are actually clicking, comparing, and engaging. And when we say a customer is ready to buy, we're talking about customers who are 15 times more likely to purchase. Actively shopping customers are 7 times more likely to transact with you. So if you're not working these buyers, you're letting high conversion traffic slip right through your fingers.
Back to your point on customer value that you mentioned a bit earlier. Sandra, I'm just wondering from the dealer perspective, can you think of real world examples where AMP re-engaged dormant or otherwise unengaged customers?
Well, we've had customers that during the buying process has been effectively made lost because they've gone through our process, but they have been re-engaged by a marketing email from AMP, something that they weren't expecting, and have re-engaged with us when we weren't actively pursuing them, that we had just let them go to the wayside. But not necessarily the customers out of the market. Our process has made them not be marketed to by us physically. So AMP has taken those customers and re-engaged them when we probably would have not even touched that customer because we thought they were technically lost.
That's a really good point. So it could be a situation with repeat business or, to your point, business that you thought you might have lost.
It could have been a customer who came from AutoTrader who just went through our 90-day process and really at the time was just starting their search. And because the process ended within the CRM, AMP was able to re-engage them based on either a buying signal they've gotten or just based on some kind of marketing that we may have done to reach out, because we have set up in our system to have customers who are lost to try to reach out to them to see, are you still engaged? Are you still looking? Because customers are behind the scenes doing research that we as a dealership don't know about. They're not looking just to have leads put in and be called constantly. And this is a very, very easy way to touch a customer with not being forceful.
Thank you, Sandra. And Nicole, when Sandra says that, it makes me think about, customer researching and what type of ways that we might be able to actually reach them with AMP, maybe through a personalized offer. I'm wondering if you might be able to talk the audience through one of those examples.
Absolutely. So using all of that data that Cox Automotive has on the customers that are in your CRM based on a combination of their sold history or what they're shopping for online, AMP is going to automatically serve up an offer, or it can do this, I shouldn't say can, not will. There's lots of ways we can tailor the campaigns to work best for you, but a really powerful way to use AMP is to send automated offers like what you're seeing on the screen here, where it can marry what that customer is potentially shopping for with a specific vehicle in your inventory, create an automated offer for that customer, and create a really seamless customer journey. And like Sandra said, we could send this offer to someone who was just a lost customer who's been sitting in your database for a couple of years now, who hasn't come in for a sale in a long time, who hasn't submitted a lead yet. But because we know that they are shopping online for a new Honda Civic, for example, we are able to send them something that would be really enticing and engaging for them.
Thanks for that. And Sandra, I'm just curious, have you used personalized offers in any of your dealerships, and has it been effective for you?
We do. We use personalized offers. They're called ad hocs in the AMP world, and we use them on a regular basis. And they seem to also, sometimes we use lists that we've generated because the OEM has said, this customer base is got a loyalty rebate, or this customer is eligible for pull ahead. When I've sent it to my marketing manager and created these kind of offers to those customers, they tend to be the customers that engage with it because they may not have known they were eligible for these things. And we've had great success with it. Our last campaign in June was one of our most successful when we did a pull ahead program.
We're really happy to hear that. And I'd love to throw it over to Jesse here. Jesse, what have you observed in the dealerships that you support with using some of these different signals and data points?
So I think the key here is the dynamic nature versus the static nature. When we speak to things like lost opportunities, we have a rigid follow-up process built within that is completely time-based. And it says, hey, let's follow up with that customer 6 months from now, 30 months from now, 39 months from now. And those things are great because they are based around real market trends, but real market trends aren't a one-size-fits-all approach to every single unique buyer. Life happens to people. There's a lot of different reasons people begin to engage with us and then lose engagement. And I think one of the things that this really benefits us with long-term is reducing things like follow-up fatigue with salespeople. When I'm asking a salesperson to make a follow-up call to a lost customer, if there is absolutely no chance that that customer is still in the market, it's an exercise in futility, and that's not going to encourage them to pick up the phone, text the customer, email the customer. On the flip side of it, if I can explain to the salesperson the importance of an AMP task that is affiliated with something like this, and that is based on a real world indicator that the customer has been online doing something and then now engaged with a piece of marketing that I've sent, this is no longer a cold lead. This is a low funnel, hot lead that we need to be aware of. And in turn, I think this benefits us in a lot of different ways because that is technically a prospecting call that is fruitful. A fruitful prospecting call will lead more salespeople to want to prospect. So I think that that is a key piece there. Static leads to a one-size-fits-all approach and follow-up fatigue, whereas a dynamic approach is something that we can utilize as an opportunity to grow our prospecting base and get our salespeople truly excited about working the customers we've spent, an entire career trying to put into our database.
Jesse, when you say that, when you talk about, working building up and working the prospecting base, it makes me wonder, Sandra, what type of campaigns, in addition to personalized offers, do your dealerships run using AMP?
Well, currently in my dealerships, we're running a lease equity from a service to sales perspective. So right now in this market, we've seen a decrease of walk-in traffic as well as internet leads. So it's now time to cultivate what's in your database. And the best way to do that is you have customers every day. In one of my stores, over 100 customers a day coming in to service their vehicles. So we're using a lease equity or a retail equity marketing campaign through AMP to see if the customer has equity in their vehicle. And if so, the salesperson will get an alert. Then they know that's a customer who's going to be in your dealership today. And you're going to try to encourage them to see if they're in the market, as well as those are customers that tend to have better profit. They've already been there. They're already paying for service in your dealership. Those customers tend to be more profitable. So you have a better chance of in keeping your customer, which is important to all the OEMs that I work with, that retention is kept. And it is one of the biggest marketing things that they're looking at this point. It's no longer how customers are satisfied, is are you retaining your customer base? And by using a service to sales campaign, you're more likely to retain your customer base, as well as using it in my service drive with customers who I have to remember and remind them, you have a car that we want to service. So there's two folds to using the service, which I think a lot of dealerships don't engage the service end of it. They think sales, 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 but remember, that's also a sales customer. You get to sell the car once, you service it multiple times. So using this product will keep that customer not only a profitable customer, but keep them a loyal customer.
That's really well put. And are there any other campaigns that you can, well, if you think back of all the AMP campaigns you've run, are there any other ones that jump out to you as creative or fun or satisfying to your
So,
customers?
so the other way I utilize it, and we're coming into that time of the year, I utilize it as a community driving marketing aspect. We do a breast cancer awareness campaign come October, where we donate to a local charity for every sale of a vehicle. We also use it as we have a breakfast with Santa. One of my most successful campaigns with this was we do a community where we have all the kids in the community come into our dealership, meet Santa, have breakfast with him, give them a gift. It has nothing to do with selling cars. It has to do with giving back to our community. And by doing that through AMP, on a Saturday, we did the campaign. I had 100 calls within 10 minutes because people engaged with it. And that's the biggest thing I have to say about this, is that the immediate response that I can get from one of these campaigns, when it's exactly what the customer is looking at and is engaged with, is overwhelming.
That just gave me a really good feeling. I could imagine that customer being happy. And Jesse, I'm kind of curious, what are some of the more creative or some of your favorite campaigns that you've seen with the dealerships you support?
You know, I actually had a dealership not that long ago run a campaign for an ad hoc campaign for trade-in leads. They ran a campaign that said, this weekend and this weekend only, too much for your trade, too little for my car. And we sent that off to about 600 people, and the dealership sold 7 cars the first day that it went out. So I think that, you know, the takeaway from that was it wasn't an email blast to 30,000 people. It was a very targeted approach to the right people where the message was salient, and it immediately resulted in engagement. So that one right there was a super simple one, but sometimes simple works, and it works really well. So that's one that I really enjoy doing with my dealers.
Thank you for sharing that. And Nicole, do you have any favorites that jump to mind for you?
Absolutely. I find, similar to Jesse, that trade acquisition is a really powerful one to do through AMP, because we have the ability to see what they might potentially be trading and what they're shopping for online, especially if you wanted to check and see which of your customers have been clicking on Kelley Blue Book. That's a really big indicator that they might be looking at their trade value. And I find those campaigns to get a lot of engagement. I definitely agree with Sandra that integrating more brand awareness into our campaigns as well, it just helps differentiate your dealership from the one down the road. A question I'll ask my dealerships a lot is, when a customer is shopping online, for example, a pre-owned vehicle, what do you want them to see about your pre-owned program? Do you want them to see the details about it? Do you want them just to be driven immediately to your pre-owned inventory? And typically when I ask those types of questions, I'm able to get a really personal answer from the dealership about what they want to be communicating to those customers that sets them apart from their competitors.
That's a really thoughtful series of questions to ask your customers. And you know, this conversation makes me think about how you actually serve these opportunities up to the salespeople. And so maybe we could talk a little bit about the opportunity list and what information is there and how you recommend dealers use it. Maybe you could lead with that, Nicole.
Yeah, definitely. And this kind of ties hand in hand with my favorite campaigns that I've run. So if you're not familiar with the AMP opportunity list, it is one of the many ways AMP has a way to identify a high value opportunity. Of course, there's tasks, there's our direct or indirect leads, but the list is a really versatile tool to create a list of people you might want to follow up with. The real world example I have to share was one of my Chevrolet dealerships reached out to me. They wanted to move their Silverado 1500 inventory, and they had a truck promotion going on for the weekend. And they wanted to know how AMP could support their efforts without inundating them with a flood of tasks or anything like that. So what I did is I created a segment of customers from their database that is customers who are shopping online for a Silverado or a similar truck, and customers who had a potential trade-in. I sent those customers to the opportunity list, and the BD manager at that Chevrolet store was able to work with her BD agents and just go down that list of high value opportunities And it was really an impactful solution instead of having them just kind of blindly reach out to anyone who's ever purchased a Silverado from them.
Okay, that's a really great real world example. And Sandra, I'm curious, do you use the opportunity list? Do you use tasks, or what approach do you use
I
in your
do. I do a
dealerships?
combination. I do a combination of both. We do have tasks that get fired, but the funniest thing about the opportunity list is always when I have a sales manager ask me, "Hey, do you have a list of customers we can call?" It's one of the better lists you can give, because giving a list of customers, oh, these customers may be in the market, you don't know. This is an actual list of customers who are actively shopping. So going back to Jesse's point, you're not really cold calling. You know that they're looking. So this opportunity list is a really, so when customers have to be called, when the dealership's slow, I find that this list is more engaging for my salespeople. They get more people on the phone. It's not, oh, I got to call this list.
That's a really good point. And Jesse, you had mentioned something earlier about follow-up fatigue.
Yeah.
Is that how you will help position the opportunity list to the dealerships you
Yeah,
support?
100%. I am a firm believer that the reason that follow-up fatigue exists in a dealership is because we have a salesperson say, "Boss, I have nobody to call." And then we reach into our desk and we pull out the list. Everybody on the call knows the list. It's the service customers. You call 100 of them. You don't set an appointment. You don't sell a car. And what you've done is you discourage the sales rep from ever picking up the phone and wanting to call your database, which we all know is critically important for not only the health of our dealership, but for that individual's health and their career. You cannot be successful as a salesperson without prospecting a database and without bringing back repeat and referral business. And I tend to look at this opportunity list in a way that maybe some of the old school car people will understand a little bit. Back in the days of direct mail, we used to do direct mail all the time. And with that direct mail came a manifest. And that manifest had a list of every customer we sent that direct mail to. And some of them had phone numbers, some of them had emails, some of them had contact info. Now, you could A/B test it, and if you did the direct mail and you had zero engagement or follow-up from your sales team, you had, default results. But if you got your sales team calling that manifest week or list the week before that big event that mailer was coming out for, you had a monster weekend. I look at this opportunity list exactly the same way. All we've done is digitize that old paper manifest, and all we've done, and obviously there is direct mail as part of VinSolutions or AMP, but when it comes to it, we've just replaced that with an email or a text, and now we've got that same manifest. So nothing works better than a message that's followed up with by a cogent message from the people who are the best on the phone when talking to a customer. And quite frankly, that's the sales management and sales staff at your store.
I think that is a really good old school car example. This is probably a good time for us to move on to discuss return on investment a little bit. And I think maybe a good place to focus would be the AMP marketing dashboard. And so just, Nicole, do you have any recommendations for your dealers when you're talking to them about measuring ROI?
Definitely. So in the AMP marketing dashboard, which exists within your CRM, and I encourage you to poke around in there when you have some time, it's under Insights if you don't have it favorited yet. My biggest recommendation, my biggest call out is that every widget on the AMP marketing dashboard is clickable. And my biggest one, of course, that we all want to look at first is the sold influence. And if you actually click within that sold influence there, you're able to get a much better story of where those sold influences are coming from. What campaign did they receive? What vehicle did they upgrade to? Most importantly, and I think most interestingly, is this column here. It's kind of in the middle if you were looking at the big chart. It's CRM last contact before AMP versus when AMP engaged them. And what this story is telling is when was the last time that lead was engaged by anyone at your store versus when did AMP pick them up and start that conversation again? And you can see right at the top in this example, there's two that didn't have any previous examples of contacted from your dealership, but AMP actually came in and started those conversations back up. And then at that point, they might have submitted a lead, called in, walked in, and purchased a car. But it just helps show when AMP actually started influencing that customer.
That's a really powerful example. I think Sandra, I'm kind of wondering, how do you think about return on investment? Are you thinking in terms of re-engagement? Are you thinking in terms of sold
I
vehicles or something else?
all of it, because what I look at is a lot of times you can't tell what's been successful, how it's been successful. And with this report, I'm able to look at it and weigh the cost of AMP. I've had this conversation that a newspaper ad, I can't tell you if I paid $2,500 for a newspaper ad, what my return on investment was. I don't have any kind of data. This actually shows if somebody did, who I've never engaged with, got that influenced email and made a purchase, and how long since when they got it to when they make the purchase, which in a GM and a GSM looking at profit, this is a way to show them this customer may not have ever come back to us, but look, because we used this product, it engaged them, it brought them back to the dealership. So for me, the bigger aspect of this is looking at the customers that we may never have gotten. So when somebody's looking, is this product worth the money? Those customers are the lost sales that you may not have gotten without having something reach out to them. So for me, that's a big plus on this side, and especially this, and as, again with the service customers, because it's not just sales. You also can see the ROI that's being driven and the return of investment of a service customer in your service department. So both of those I think are huge.
Thank you for sharing that with the audience. And Jesse, I'm kind of curious, what sort of guidance are you giving your dealerships on using the dashboard to measure ROI or just ROI in general?
You know, one of the things that I like to talk about is the difference between a direct and an indirect lead. And I think that this is one of the places where dealers can feel like AMP maybe isn't generating the traction that they're looking for. So I think it's really important to clearly define what a direct lead is. So imagine that a customer comes in and scans a QR code with their phone, and that submits a one-to-one lead directly into VinSolutions, okay? That is a direct lead. That is a customer that no other influence saw that, clicked in, and brought it to you. I want to think of an indirect lead like a billboard on the freeway. You drive down the freeway every single day on your way to work, and every single day on your way to work, you see Southwest Plumbing up on the billboard. You never think about it. It doesn't matter until the day it does. And then your toilet backs up, and all of a sudden you need a plumber. And the first thing that pops into your mind is Southwest Plumbing. Why? Because you drove by the damn billboard every single day for the last 5 years, right? That's precisely what AMP is doing with these indirect leads. And I think the coolest part about that is when you start to look at the campaign messages that these customers get over time before they engage with us, it's not just a message about upgrading their car. It's not just a message about coming in for service. It's not just a message about their trade. It is real behavioral based. So the message that we're sending to the customer, again, getting back to it, why it's not a blast, is a one-to-one. It actually means something to them. As a result, you are front of mind when it's time to make that decision. So when the radiator goes out on the old car and it's just not worth fixing it again, the first place they think of is Jesse Gray Motors. Why? Because I've been in front of them for the last 5 years.
I know if I were going to buy a car, it definitely would be from Jesse Gray Motors.
Thank you.
We've spent a good bit of time talking about, using the customer's behavior, the buying signals to give them compelling personalized offers or communications. We've talked a little bit about ROI. So let's say that you've got a customer engaged with AMP. Do you have any advice on following up with that customer? And
That is
Nicole,
sorry,
please.
that is a great question.
Go
I was
for it.
going to say, one that I often get as a marketing account manager, especially you're fresh, you go live, tasks start being generated, leads start coming in, and then sometimes it's kind of hard to follow up with some of those customers, potentially because we're targeting sometimes lost leads who are exhibiting buying signals now. They might not have sold or service history for you to kind of lean on when you're crafting that follow-up. What you can do to make that follow-up a bit easier is actually use VinSolutions GenAI, and that just helps your team who's following up with those opportunities not have to think too much about what they're putting into that message. It makes that whole process a lot more efficient. And the best part is that it's using the same data that AMP already used. So it knows the same information about that customer that AMP already knows, and it's crafting a really intelligent follow-up without your BD agents or your sales reps calling me a little bit stressed out because they don't know how to follow up with the customer. Although I'm happy to help with that too.
That's a really great example. And Jesse, I'm wondering, how are you are you seeing any benefits with your dealerships and GenAI?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the dealerships that utilize generative AI and the salespeople that are leveraging generative AI are generally getting a 26% better response rate when they send an email out to a customer. And it kind of makes sense, right? When we hire a salesperson, we're hiring certain skills. We want that person to be really personable, great on the phone, but generally we're not going through and hiring like an English literature major who's a really good writer. And this is a place where I think that salespeople feel less confident. And when somebody's less confident, what I think ends up happening is they lean on things like templates. And the challenge with a template, just like a blast out to our entire database, is that we are assuming that every customer is going to respond exactly the same way. When we're using things like generative AI, that can take into account the way that real conversations are made and that we can coach through and kind of tell it the general gist of what we want to get across, it can take care of the rest. So I think the big difference there is the difference, again, between that static template type thing and the dynamic approach where it is more human and it gets the message across better.
That's really well put. And Sandra, I'm just curious, do you have any comments or any advice for the audience on good follow-up or effective follow-up, I should say, after AMP has engaged customers?
You need to take a very softer approach because it's like a timid animal. You know, they've been engaging, but they're not necessarily ready. So you have to, and I think the GenAI helps with that. It helps to smooth the transition for the BD agent or the salesperson to then see where the customer is and let them come to you at their pace. Because picking up a phone going, hey, I see you just got an email and you opened it and clicked it, they just will go, no, I'm not in the market. I've seen it happen. So taking a very soft approach, using the GenAI, maybe engaging with a softer text message back or an email back will start the conversation and make it a lot easier to convert that customer from just a prospect back to a sale.
I think that is really good advice, and perhaps a good place for us also to include the panel discussion portion. I thank you all for taking part and for sharing your insights. And before we get to the Q&As from the audience, I actually have a question to ask the audience. And that question is, would you like to learn more about subscribing either to Automotive Marketing Platform or to Predictive Insights with GenAI? Just pick the best reply that works for you. I'll leave that up for just a moment. In the meantime, I can see we've gotten some questions coming in. So please keep sending them in and we will get through as many as we can. And I really appreciate everybody who has taken part in this audience poll. We'll give it just one moment and get into questions. All right, thanks everyone. And we'll dive right into questions here then. So we got one about GenAI. How would you suggest to prompt GenAI to include supply and demand on a template, and where does that data come from? So I assume they're talking about available inventory. I'm not, if they want to follow up with what they mean by demand.
I can fill this one since I do a lot of this stuff with prompts. One of the things that I found is that it's trial and error in terms of figuring out exactly the right word salad that you want to feed it in terms of a prompt. The ones that I have had a lot of success with are the catchphrases create urgency and then the catchphrase scarcity appeal. Those two work incredibly well in terms of the generative AI saying things like, you know, you reached out about the 2024 Tacoma pickup truck. Great choice. That is a very popular model and they're going quickly. I have a few in stock, but they won't last long. So I think that that's one of the big things in terms of like a conversation that we need to be focusing a lot on, is the fact that that vehicle is available, but it won't be available forever. So create urgency and scarcity appeal. Those two key phrases work exceptionally well in generative AI. Great question, though.
That's a great response. Well done. So
Thank you.
another question, yeah, well done. And so someone has asked, hey, can I get a presentation sent to me as a recording? Yes, you will. We will send it after the broadcast. It'll be automated. And feel free to pick up a copy of the slides in the handout section right now. Another one, so this dealer is asking, where can they find the opportunities list in the marketing dashboard? Or maybe just more generally, where can they find the opportunities list?
Yeah, so I can speak to that one real quick.
Yeah, thank you.
The opportunity list lives in your CRM in VinSolutions. If you go to the customers tab, there'll be a drop down, and all the way at the bottom, I believe it is opportunity list. There is also a place where you can monitor the ROI on the opportunity dashboard within the dashboard itself. Too many dashboards going around. But we do have a widget in the AMP marketing dashboard that will show you how many opportunities were completed this month, how many are still active, and that's more for reporting. But the actual list itself exists under customers opportunity list. And if you need help accessing that, if it might be something your marketing account manager can make sure that you have access to and everything, because sometimes there's just that little setup there.
That's a really good point, Nicole. And just I'd love to ask Sandra a question here as well about that. Sandra, when you meet with your marketing account manager, what sort of topics do you discuss?
So I go into it based on what advertising and what we're setting up. So my marketing rep has a 3-month plan. So we know what I'm going to be doing September, October, November, and based on what things in the dealership are happening. So there might be, for September, we're focusing on back to school. So it's focusing on our service, getting our cars ready. So we always have it generally based on what's going on in the dealership, and I tie it into my traditional advertising and my digital advertising. AMP is used for me as an advertising source to market to the customers who are in the market in different ways. So we'll have something about service, I'll have something about community. So there's always something, and I usually do it based on my advertising plan, which is 3 months out. So it's always on a 90-day basis. So my marketing manager will have, what are we doing in August, September, October? So she has a 3-month plan for me. And I feel like if you go in with that kind of thought process, you will use AMP to its fullest extent and not just use it as, oh, what am I going to do this month? Let me blast out my customers. Because if you're using it as a traditional advertising marketing platform, which what it is, you will have success with it.
Thank you for sharing that, and also that focus on the time horizon, right? It's forward looking, it's multi-month rather than just what can I get into market this month? That's really thoughtful. So another question we got is, what are some of the benefits of using multiple marketing channels? And maybe Nicole, I could throw that one to you, please.
Yeah, that is a great question. AMP, as you might be aware if you're on the call, has an omni-channel capability, an omni-channel approach to our marketing. And what that means is that we're not just sending emails, we're sending emails, text messages, and direct mail. Direct mail being more of the optional choice, typically definitely doing emails and text by standard. And what we find is that when you're using a campaign that has all of these omni-channel approaches engaged, you see almost 11 times more ROI than if you were doing email alone. So it definitely makes a big impact in how many customers you can reach and how you reach out to them if you have all of these channels at your fingertips in order to make sure you're reaching everyone with the right message at the right time.
Thank you. And so then we got another question. I think they're wondering why they can't just text customers with AMP. Why can't they just use AMP to text customers whenever they have a promotion? So it might be an opt-out related issue or something like that.
Yeah, I think it depends. I know that similar to email blasts, we definitely don't want to send text message blasts to the entire database at risk of spiking your opt-out rate. But there's certainly opportunity to integrate texting into your monthly promotions.
Okay, thank you. And this one, one of the audience members asked, do you suggest starting to target a customer when the buying signals indicate they're starting to shop, or wait until they are further down the funnel? So I guess the question is really like, where do you reach out depending on where they are in the funnel and how strong that buying signal is? Maybe Jesse, if you have any opinions on that.
Well, so I don't think there's ever a bad time to get a message in front of a customer. And I think one of the beautiful things about AMP is that based on the segments we have set up in there, whether the customer is casually shopping, whether they're browsing, actively shopping, or ready to buy, we can deliver the right message to the customer because we're able to predict the behavior. So, kind of piggybacking off the last question, why don't we just text blast everybody? Well, we can, and you can do the same thing with email too. But I think the important thing to understand is that in the background, AMP is always doing this stuff for us, right? You may not see it in terms of 30,000 emails or text messages going out in a single day, but over the course of time, AMP is ultimately touching almost every customer in your database at some point in time. And the marketing that they're sending to them is going to be congruent with where they're actually at in the marketplace. So I think that there's no time that's too early, just like the billboard analogy, right? The sooner that I can get my billboard in front of the customer and start to influence them, the more likely they are when they are ready to make that buying decision that they consider me and come back into my fold. And I think that that's a different strategy than what a lot of customers are accustomed to. And I mean, think outside the dealership, almost any place you go, they want to get your email address. Why? So they can send you a bunch of irrelevant messaging and ultimately get you to opt out, and then you miss maybe the relevant message. And I think that that's the other really big piece about this is because we keep that message relevant, we have very low opt-out rates, and we are more likely to keep that customer engaged, whereas the alternative is just throwing something out there and potentially risking our database for it. So
I think that's a very thoughtful point, and maybe this is kind of a piggyback there. How should dealers think about follow-up from AMP versus traditional CRM follow-up?
I mean,
And
to speak to that, it's a softer approach. Think of it almost like a non-customer initiated lead, although they did initiate it. But I think Sandra touched on that earlier with the softer approach, and that's a coaching thing with our salespeople. It's just like we train them to handle a trade-in lead differently than we do a sale lead. We may train them to handle a Costco customer differently than they handle a Car Guru's customer. This is a pretty foundational and easy thing to train with when it comes to our salespeople, and it's a matter of coaching them around the opportunity. Facilitate it, figure out how it arrived with you, right? If it's a service only customer, start by thanking them for being a loyal service customer. Tell them the purpose of your phone call. If they're a previous sold customer, I tell a lot of dealers my strategy with the sold customer isn't to lead with the, hey, do you want to upgrade? My strategy there is, hey, did you know, what would you do with your equity? How would you put your equity to work? Start with what they've got, because ultimately, if you look at those buying signals and you dive deep into VIN, what you're going to find is almost all the customers that have a trade start their shopping trying to figure out what their car is worth. For most customers, they're more concerned about the car they have than the one you're trying to sell them. So if we can convey that to our salespeople and properly coach the salespeople through that, give them great word tracks, right? And again, practice with them so that the first time that they're doing it isn't, with live fire. Practice with the salesperson, practice with the manager, make it part of your daily routine. And soon enough, they have the word track down and you're killing it with results.
Thank you for that, Jesse. And I really like how you talked about the coaching and training for the salesperson too. So another question we got is, where in VIN can we find benchmarks for AMP? So I assume they're talking about outside of the AMP marketing dashboard. Maybe it gets into different types of communications or close rates or things like that.
That is a great question. And as far as benchmarks specific to AMP, I'm not sure necessarily where in the CRM, other than potentially things like the PACE report, where you could see how are we doing this time last year before we installed AMP versus now that we have AMP running, how are things going? And that can give you a high level view. And I'm sure Jesse knows maybe even more CRM reports than I know.
what I was going to say is when I have dealers ask me to compare their performance prior to AMP and with AMP, there isn't like a direct comparison report there, but any performance manager in VinSolutions should be able to help you out with that data. And you can tell them if they can't figure it out to reach out to me. And I would be more than happy to sit with them and try to figure out how we plan those or project those things out. And I'm also not sure too if the question when we talk about benchmarks is in terms of like what expectations are, like what percentage, and maybe there could be some clarity there, because when I hear benchmarks, I think, well, our benchmark is to close 10% of internet leads. Our benchmark is to set 60% appointments. And as you look at something like AMP, you know, when you compare to the benchmarks I give dealerships, for instance, like email return, I tell dealers they should try to get a 20% reply rate from their emails. Okay, you look into email engagement with AMP, it's generally somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30%. So that's usually a pretty good key indicator that those AMP emails in that communication are performing at a higher level. They're more engaging than the other communication that is out there. So I think it can be difficult to benchmark things, because the other part of the tool is a lot of the results in AMP, just like anything else, are how much you put into it. If you are not having consistent meetings with your MAM and your performance manager, and you are not working on those things together and not strategizing, then you are going to get default results from it, right? And the default results can be great for a lot of stores, but if you want to add more to it, that's a matter of, you know, plugging in and taking advantage of some of the things that we've talked about today.
That's really well put. And I think one key takeaway there might be start with the reports that you have in your Vin CRM, and then talk about them with your performance manager and your MAM to help answer those questions more specifically. And
yeah, 100%. And the MAM can strategize on the marketing. The PM can help you strategize on what we do once the lead gets there and how we get the best results with it.
Thank you for saying that. And we're just a touch over time. I'm just wondering, Nicole or Sandra, do you have any last comments for the audience?
Yeah, I just think you should really, if you're looking at this product, look at it as not just set it and forget it. It actually has to be a product that you're fully engaged with, that you meet with your rep, that you talk to them, and you come up with a strategy. And it works. And I've only had the product a little bit more than 18 months, and I've had great results in it, and it works phenomenally when you work it. It's not something to set it and forget it.
Thank you, Sandra. And Nicole, anything else to add there?
Well, I love everything Sandra said, and I think that goes along with sometimes it can be easy to forget all of the things that AMP is doing in the background as far as engaging those customers who are triggering signals, things like that. And being in touch with your PM or your marketing account manager really helps you feel more in tune with what AMP is doing and how it's bringing value to your store. And then you have even more control over the types of marketing that you want to run.
Thank you, Nicole. And that brings us to the end of the webinar. A big thank you to Sandra Dell'Olio from Atlantic Auto Group. And thanks also to Jesse and to Nicole for their many contributions. Also, thanks to the audience for joining us and taking time out of your busy day. We sincerely hope that this webinar provided some actionable insights and hopefully some winning strategies too. Please let us know how we did in the exit survey. And we wish everybody a good week and a successful August and beyond. Thank you much and goodbye.